By the next morning, silence was impossible. Emily barely slept, her dreams still crowded with Harlan's sneer. She woke to the sound of her mother's phone buzzing again and again. Each notification carried the same headline: substitute teacher, accused of abuse, school under fire. The story had spread like wildfire. Local reporters swarmed the school parking lot before first bell, cameras snapping as students whispered nervously on the sidewalks. The headlines weren't kind, they weren't gentle, they weren't even fully accurate. Some painted Emily as a victim too weak to speak. Others hinted at exaggeration, at rumors spiraling out of control. Ms. Lowell watched it all from her car, parked across the street. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles whitened. She had seen her own face in the articles too. Substitute raises alarm. Former victim speaks out. The exposure felt like a second violation. Inside, the school board held an emergency meeting. The superintendent's voice carried down the hallway, sharp, defensive. We cannot allow this to destroy our reputation. Our first responsibility is to the community's trust. Trust, the word soured on Ms. Lowell's tongue. Whose trust? The parents who had begged the school to protect their children? Or the board members who now cared only about saving face? Parents gathered in the auditorium that afternoon, their voices a storm of fear and anger. One mother clutched her son's hand, tears streaking her cheeks. You were supposed to keep them safe. How many more were hurt before anyone acted? The board shifted uncomfortably, offering polished reassurances and promises of further investigation. But everyone in that room felt the hollowness. The damage had already been done. Emily sat in the back row, shrinking into her seat. She couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Whispers swirled around her like smoke, about her, about Harlan, about what might be true and what might be rumor. Her chest ached with guilt. Maybe if she'd spoken sooner, none of this would have happened. Ms. Lowell placed a hand on her shoulder. This isn't on you, she whispered. Don't let them make you carry the weight of their failures. But Emily could see it in Ms. Lowell's face. The weight of guilt lived there too, for not stopping her own abuser years ago, for not catching Harlan sooner, for every child who might have suffered in the silence between. That night, the local news ran interviews with former students. Some defended Harlan, insisting he was misunderstood. Others finally spoke truths they had buried, describing unsettling encounters that sounded too familiar. Each testimony cut deeper. The system had failed at every turn. Complaints ignored, suspicions brushed aside, records buried under bureaucracy, and, through it all, Harlan himself remained silent. His absence from the media was chilling. The board called it ongoing investigation, but Emily knew what it really was: protection. He was still out there, shielded by the very institution meant to guard the vulnerable. The headlines grew sharper the next day. District accused of cover-up. Parents demand resignations. The scandal was no longer about one teacher. It was about every adult who looked away. Emily scrolled through the articles on her phone, each word clawing at her chest. She closed her eyes and whispered, "It's never going to stop, is it?" Ms. Lowell sat beside her, steady but weary. "It will stop," she said softly, "when we make it stop. When the truth is louder than the lies." Emily wanted to believe her. She wanted to believe that headlines could do more than haunt, that they could heal, expose, change. But as the noise grew louder, the path forward only seemed darker, because headlines alone couldn't bring justice. And justice, Emily realized, was still far away. Chapter 12. The last lesson: the headlines never stopped. Even after the board issued statements, after resignations trickled in, after whispers of lawsuits filled the air, the story refused to fade. Emily lived inside that noise. Every article, every broadcast, every question reminding her of what had been taken. But silence found her in smaller moments, late at night, when her mother finally fell asleep on the couch clutching a blanket, in the stillness of her bedroom, where the faint glow of her lamp illuminated the pages of a plain leather-bound diary. It had been a gift from Ms. Lowell, handed to her with gentle insistence. Sometimes the only way to carry the weight is to put it down on paper. Now, with trembling fingers, Emily turned to a fresh page. She let the pen hover, uncertain if she was ready to see her own thoughts spelled out in ink. But the need was there, the need to name what had happened, to write what no headline could capture. She began slowly. The classroom was supposed to be safe. It was supposed to be where I learned, not where I feared. Her hand shook, but the words spilled anyway. She wrote about the day she first noticed Harlan's eyes lingering too long. She wrote about the shame that grew each time no one seemed to notice. She wrote about the guilt, the suffocating belief that maybe she had done something to deserve it. And she wrote about the silence, how heavy it felt, how it wrapped around her throat until she couldn't breathe. Tears blurred the ink, but she didn't stop. She wrote about her mother's tears in the principal's office, about the boards, hollow promises, about the betrayal that came not only from Harlan, but from every adult who chose denial over truth. She wrote about Ms. Lowell, the woman who had stood beside her when no one else did, who had carried her own scars but refused to let Emily drown in hers, and she wrote about survival. Because despite it all, she was still here, breathing, writing, trying. Her words became a rhythm, each sentence a release. I thought silence was survival. But silence almost killed me. I'm still afraid, but I'm not invisible anymore. I'm here, I'm writing, I'm learning again, in my own way. She paused, staring at what she had written. For the first time, the page didn't look like a prison, it looked like a window. The pen moved again. Some teachers give us lessons we never forget. Some teach us to dream, to believe, to fight. Others leave scars instead of knowledge. They teach fear. They teach silence. They teach pain. Those are the lessons that should never have existed. Emily exhaled shakily. That sentence felt like a truth too large for the page, yet it was the only way she could name it. Downstairs, she heard the faint sound of the TV. Another news report. Another headline. Another adult trying to explain away a wound they hadn't lived through. But here, on her page, Emily's voice finally mattered. She thought of the future, of classrooms she might one day step into without trembling, of lessons that could rebuild instead of break. She wasn't there yet. Healing was not a straight path, it was jagged, painful, uneven. Some nights the fear would still own her. Some mornings the headlines would reopen every cut. But she had written. And writing was a start. She closed the diary, pressing her hand against the cover as if sealing the words inside. A faint strength lingered in her chest, fragile but real. Tomorrow the world would still argue about policies and lawsuits. The board would still scramble to defend its reputation. Reporters would still chase soundbites. None of that would stop. But tonight, in the quiet of her room, Emily had written her truth. She whispered aloud as if testing the words against the silence. I survived. Her voice wavered, but it did not disappear. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe those words might carry her forward. She turned off the lamp, the diary resting on her nightstand. Darkness filled the room, but it no longer felt like a trap. It felt like rest. Still, as she closed her eyes, one thought lingered. The classroom, the place meant for lessons of growth and wonder, had instead taught her fear, betrayal, silence. Those lessons would never leave. They had scarred too deep. But maybe, just maybe, she could choose what to do with them now. Maybe the last lesson was hers to write. The fight in the principal's office echoed in Emily's ears long after she left. Her mother's fury, Mr. Keller's smooth dismissal, Mr. Harlan's calm lies, it all played on repeat like a broken tape. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing something terrible. Adults weren't going to save her. If she wanted the truth, she'd have to find it herself. By morning, a fragile plan had formed. Emily tucked her phone into her backpack, the voice recorder app. Pre-med. The thought of confronting Harlan made her stomach churn, but Ms. Lowell's whispered warnings had taken root. Patterns. Teachers as predators. If no one believed her, she would make them listen, with proof. That afternoon, she lingered after class, waiting as the last students trickled out. Harlan stacked papers at his desk, humming faintly, too cheerful for someone under suspicion. Emily's heart hammered as she pressed record and slid the phone deep into her pocket. "Mr. Harlan?" Her voice cracked. He glanced up, smiling. "Emily, staying late again? You're making a habit of it." I wanted to ask about what you told my mom yesterday." He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. "Your mother is very passionate. She loves you. That's good. But sometimes passion blinds people." Emily took a shaky breath. "She's not blind. She's scared. I'm scared." The smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned. "Fear can be useful. It keeps us cautious, teaches us where the boundaries are." Her skin prickled. "Boundaries?" "Yes." He leaned forward, his eyes suddenly sharper, voice low. "The classroom is a sacred place, a stage, a cage, a space where roles are played, teacher, student, obedience, discipline. If one forgets their role, everything collapses." Emily gripped her desk so hard her knuckles whitened. "What about the student who died?" she whispered. For the first time, Harlan's smile slipped entirely. His gaze drifted toward the blackboard, where faint chalk smudges remained from the day's lesson. Tragedies happen. Sometimes students wander too close to the edge, sometimes they need reminding. Emily's pulse thundered. She prayed the recorder was catching every word. "Reminding of what?" "That control isn't theirs," he said, almost dreamily. "It never has been. Teachers guide, teachers shape, and sometimes—" He stopped himself, eyes narrowing. Suddenly, Emily froze. His head tilted, bird-like, calculating. "You're awfully curious today. She scrambled for a cover. "I just want to understand." He rose slowly, pacing toward her desk. His shoes clicked against the tile. Steady, unhurried. "Understanding is dangerous, Emily. Most students are content to obey, but not you. You watch, you question. That makes you interesting." Her throat tightened. The phone in her pocket suddenly felt like a burning coal. Then his gaze dropped. His eyes lingered on the faint bulge in her pocket. "What's that?" Emily's stomach dropped. "Nothing." He extended his hand. "Show me." She shook her head, backing up. His tone sharpened. "Now." Emily bolted, but he was faster. His hand clamped around her wrist, twisting. The phone slipped out and clattered to the floor, screen glowing with the recording app still running. For a heartbeat, silence. Then his face darkened. Something monstrous surfacing beneath the polished mask. "You little spy." Emily struggled, breath ragged. "Let me go." But his grip tightened. He crouched, plucked up the phone, and studied the glowing screen. His lips curled into a half smile, half snarl. "Recording me? Clever, very clever. Do you know what happens to clever little girls who can't keep secrets?" Tears blurred her vision. "Everyone will hear it. They'll know what you are." He chuckled, low and cold. "Not if they never get the chance." With one swift motion, he smashed the phone against the desk. The screen spiderwebbed, the recording cut short. Shards scattered across the floor. Emily's scream stuck in her throat. She ripped free and stumbled back, her chair toppling behind her. Harlan loomed, breathing harder now, the mask completely gone. "You've made a mistake, Emily. A mistake you can't undo." At that moment, the door rattled. A knock. Miss Lowell's voice. "Emily, are you still inside?" Harlan froze. His mask flickered back into place, almost seamless, but Emily had seen the truth beneath it. Her heart pounded as she realized the game had changed. She wasn't just a frightened student anymore. She was prey, and he knew she knew it. Chapter 10. The Substitute Strikes Back. The knock at the door jolted Harlan like a current. He loosened his grip on Emily, straightened his tie, and swept the broken phone shards into his desk drawer in one sharp motion. His mask returned just as the knob clicked. "Emily?" Ms. Lowell's voice floated in again, softer this time. Emily's heart thudded against her ribs. She darted a glance at Harlan. His eyes warned her. "Say nothing." With trembling fingers, she adjusted her fallen chair and whispered, "I'm okay." The door creaked open anyway. Ms. Lowell stepped inside, her eyes narrowing instantly at the scene. The toppled chair, Emily's pale face, Harlan's stiff posture. She closed the door behind her. "Working late, Mr. Harlan?" Her tone was deceptively casual. He smiled thinly. "Just helping Emily with an assignment. She's ambitious." Emily swallowed, staring at the floor, unable to speak. Ms. Lowell crossed the room, her heels clicking with deliberate rhythm. "Funny thing," she said, folding her arms. "I remember another teacher who liked keeping students after class, back when I was 13. The air seemed to tighten. Harlan's smile faltered. "I'm not sure what you mean." Emily looked up, startled. Ms. Lowell's voice had shifted, low, steady, weighted with something heavy. "He told me I was different, special, that no one would believe me if I ever said a word. And he was right. They didn't. They said I misread things, that he was respected, that I was confused." Emily's breath caught. Ms. Lowell's gaze sharpened, pinning Harlan. "Does that sound familiar to you?" For a split second, his mask cracked again. "You should leave," he said coldly. "Not this time." She stepped closer, standing between him and Emily. "I didn't stop him back then. But I can stop you now." Harlan's voice hardened. "Careful, Ms. Lowell. Accusations like that ruin careers." Her laugh was bitter. "So does truth. And this time I'm not a child. You picked the wrong student, the wrong classroom, the wrong substitute to play your games in." Emily's pulse surged. For the first time, she wasn't alone. Harlan's eyes darted toward the locked door, then back to Ms. Lowell. "Do you really think anyone will believe you? My word against yours, against hers? Look at me, look at my record. I've been shaping this school for years. Principals bend, parents doubt, students disappear into silence. What do you have?" Ms. Lowell's expression hardened. "My scars. And my resolve." Silence stretched, the hum of the classroom clock filling the space. Emily felt electricity building, a storm ready to break. Then Harlan moved. Fast. His hand shot toward the desk drawer, where the shards of Emily's phone lay hidden. Maybe he meant to destroy them, maybe to grab something sharper. Emily gasped. But Ms. Lowell was quicker. She slammed the drawer shut with her palm, cutting him off. "Not this time." His face twisted with fury. "You think you can stop me?" Her voice trembled, but she stood tall. "I already have. Because you exposed yourself, Harlan, to me. To her. The difference is this time we're not silent." He sneered. "And you'll drag a child through this circus? You'll scar her for life just to settle your vendetta?" Ms. Lowell shook her head. "She's already scarred. By you. But if she sees you fall, maybe those scars will start to heal." Emily's throat tightened. "I'm not afraid anymore," she whispered. The words shocked even her. But saying them, she realized, they were true. Harlan's composure crumbled. He lunged, trying to shove past Ms. Lowell, but she held her ground, shoving him back with a strength Emily hadn't expected. "Get out of this classroom," Ms. Lowell said through clenched teeth. "Because the moment you step into the hallway, you're done. I'll shout the truth loud enough for every student and teacher to hear." His chest heaved, fury radiating off him. For a second, Emily thought he might strike. But then he froze, calculating like a predator recognizing when the hunt had turned. Slowly, he smoothed his shirt and sneered. "You think this ends here? It doesn't. I've survived worse." Ms. Lowell didn't flinch. "So have I." He brushed past her, yanked the door open, and stormed into the hallway. His footsteps echoed, fading but not gone. Emily collapsed into her chair, shaking. Tears spilled freely now, but they were different. Lighter, almost cleansing. Ms. Lowell knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. You did so well. You were brave. Emily sniffled. He'll come back. Yes, Ms. Lowell admitted softly. Predators always circle back. But next time he won't be hidden. Next time he'll be hunted. The words lingered, heavy and certain. And Emily knew the confrontation wasn't over. It was only beginning. The faculty lounge was empty when Ms. Lowell slipped inside. Afternoon light filtered weakly through the blinds, dust shimmering in its glow. On the table before her lay a manila folder, thick with papers she hadn't shown anyone in years. She exhaled, hands trembling slightly as she spread them across the table. The headlines screamed at her in bold, unforgiving letters. Student death rocks Brookfield High. Mysterious tragedy, another teen lost. Teacher offers comfort amid chaos. Different towns, different schools, but always the same script. Ms. Lowell's pulse quickened as she scanned the grainy photographs of grief-stricken communities. The students were different, the architecture of the schools changed, but the presence in each tragedy was disturbingly familiar. A teacher at the center, beloved, trusted, always the one who grieved the most. She flipped to a smaller clipping, one she had nearly memorized. It showed a smiling man standing with a group of students, his hand resting casually on the shoulder of a girl who later turned up dead. The caption named him differently, Michael Harrington. But the jawline, the eyes, the almost imperceptible curl of his smile, Ms. Lowell knew that face. Mr. Harlan. Her stomach clenched as dread coiled in her chest. She hadn't wanted to believe it, not fully, but the pattern was undeniable. He wasn't just part of the tragedies. He was the thread tying them together. A sound in the hallway snapped her back. She shoved the folder closed and pressed it against her chest. The door creaked open. Emily stood there hesitant, clutching her notebook like a shield. Sorry, Emily stammered. I didn't mean to. It's all right, Ms. Lowell said gently, though her nerves hummed. Come in, but close the door. Emily obeyed, her eyes darting to the folder. That's about him, isn't it, Mr. Harlan? Ms. Lowell hesitated. Revealing too much could put the girl in danger. But she saw the fear etched into Emily's face, the same fear she had seen before in other students, before it was too late. You noticed things, Ms. Lowell said quietly. I can tell. Emily nodded. In detention, the way he looked at me, the way he locked the door. And Maya. Her voice broke. He wants people to think it was her fault, but it wasn't. I know it. Ms. Lowell reached across the table, placing her hand gently over Emily's. You're not wrong. For a moment, the weight of the truth hung between them. Then Ms. Lowell slowly opened the folder, sliding one of the clippings toward Emily. This isn't the first time. Emily's eyes widened as she read. Her knuckles whitened around her notebook. He's done this before? At least twice, that I can prove. There may be more. Different towns, different names. He moves on when suspicion gets too close, reinvents himself and finds another school. Ms. Lowell's voice faltered. I tried to raise questions once, years ago. But, without proof, they dismissed me, said I was hysterical. By the time I gathered enough, he was gone. Emily swallowed hard. So what do we do now? Ms. Lowell leaned back, staring at the folder as though it contained both answers and damnation. We gather evidence. Real evidence this time. Enough. That they can't silence us, enough that he can't slip away again. But he'll know, Emily whispered. He'll figure out we're watching him. Yes, Ms. Lowell admitted. Which is why we need to be careful. Very careful. A faint echo of footsteps drifted through the hallway. Both of them froze. The knob rattled slightly, then stilled. Neither moved until the sound receded. Emily exhaled shakily. What if he already suspects? Ms. Lowell closed the folder, her decision made. Then we have to stay one step ahead of him. Emily clutched her notebook tighter. Ms. Lowell could see the terror in her eyes, but also resolve. The girl was braver than most. Together they would trace the pattern, uncover the truth, and finally unmask the man hiding behind the perfect teacher facade. But Ms. Lowell knew what came next. Patterns always escalated, and the next move would be his. Chapter 8. The Parent-Teacher Confrontation. The morning after Emily's late-night meeting with Ms. Lowell, the air at home was thick with tension. Her mother, Patricia, had noticed the restless tossing, the swollen eyes, the silence at breakfast. Emily hadn't said much, but mothers sense storms before they break. By noon, Patricia was at the school. Her heels clicked sharply against the linoleum as she strode toward the main office, determination burning in her chest. Emily trailed behind, reluctant, her notebook clutched tightly in her arms. Inside, the principal, Mr. Keller, rose to greet them with his usual politician's smile. "Mrs. Hart, Emily, what brings you in today?" Patricia didn't return the smile. She gripped her purse strap as though it were the only thing holding her together. "It's about my daughter's safety," she said firmly. "And about Mr. Harlan." The room stiffened. The secretary paused mid-typing, glancing nervously at Keller before lowering her eyes. Keller cleared his throat and gestured toward the chairs. "Let's sit and talk this through." Emily lowered herself into the seat, wishing she could disappear. Patricia remained standing. "I want to know why my daughter was kept in detention so late, and why the doors were locked. She came home shaken. This isn't discipline. It's intimidation." Keller raised his palms. "Mrs. Hart, I understand your concern, but Mr. Harlan is one of our most respected teachers. He's been here less than a year and already made remarkable contributions. Students admire him." "Not all students," Patricia snapped. "One of them is dead, in case you've forgotten." The words cracked like a whip. Keller's smile faltered. He leaned forward, lowering his voice as though volume controlled reality. "That tragedy is still under investigation. Until authorities give us direction, we mustn't rush to conclusions." Patricia's composure wavered. Her eyes filled, but her voice rose. "My daughter is terrified. She feels unsafe in her own school. Isn't that enough for you?" The secretary shifted uncomfortably. Emily hugged her notebook tighter, cheeks burning. She wanted to speak, to confirm her mother's words, but fear clamped her throat shut. Keller sighed, steepling his fingers. "I sympathize truly. But accusations against staff can have serious consequences. Careers are destroyed, reputations." "Reputations?" Patricia's voice broke into a bitter laugh. "My daughter's safety is worth more than his reputation, the IE." Ducker opened then, and Mr. Harlan himself appeared carrying a stack of papers. His eyes flicked over the scene, landing on Patricia's flushed face, then on Emily shrinking in her seat. His expression softened into practiced concern. "Is everything all right?" he asked, voice laced with calm authority. Patricia straightened. "Everything is not all right. My daughter—" Keller interrupted swiftly. "We're just discussing some concerns, Mr. Harlan. Nothing you need to worry about." But Harlan stepped closer, his gaze locking on Patricia. "I assure you, Mrs. Hart, I treat all my students with the utmost care. Emily is bright. Sometimes discipline feels harsh, but it's only to push her to her potential. I would never harm her." Emily's stomach twisted. The room blurred as he spoke, his tone so convincing that even she almost doubted herself. Patricia shook her head, tears spilling now. "I don't believe you, and I don't believe this school is protecting my daughter." Keller rose, placing a hand gently on Patricia's arm. "Please, this kind of outburst isn't productive. We'll review detention procedures, I promise, but accusing a teacher without evidence, well, it could backfire." Patricia pulled away, trembling. "Backfire? On who? My daughter?" Emily felt invisible, as though her words would never carry weight. Silence became her shield, survival her only strategy. At last, Patricia stormed out, muttering, "I'll find someone who listens." Emily followed, her heart split between gratitude and dread. Behind them, Keller and Harlan exchanged a look, one of weary allies defending a fortress. And Emily knew then. She was more alone than ever. The last bell had rung, yet Emily's footsteps echoed alone in the hallway. Most students had already rushed out to the freedom of home, but she lingered, gripping her notebook tightly. A crumpled slip of paper sat inside. Detention, room 3B, 6 p.m. She hadn't deserved it. A missing homework assignment had been excuse enough for Harlan to write her name down, his smile too sharp as he said, "We'll fix that together after hours." Her stomach twisted. She knew what people whispered about late detentions, but whispers weren't proof. Now she would see for herself. The corridors dimmed as the sun sank outside, shadows stretching like claws across the floor. Emily pushed. "Open the door to room 3B. The blinds were drawn, only one lamp glowed in the corner, casting the room in half-light. "Ah, Emily," Harlan greeted, his voice smooth. He leaned against the teacher's desk, sleeves rolled to his elbows. "Right on time. That already puts you ahead of most." She didn't reply. She sat at a desk near the middle, her fingers tapping nervously against her notebook. He walked toward her, slow and deliberate. "Do you know why I keep detention, Emily? It's not punishment, it's opportunity. A chance to connect. To help students where the normal day doesn't allow." His words oozed charm, but there was something coiled beneath them. "I'll finish the homework," Emily muttered, pulling out her textbook. Harlan chuckled. "Homework isn't the point, look at me." Reluctantly, she raised her eyes. His gaze pinned her, intense yet calm, the kind of look that made others feel seen. But to her, it felt like being dissected. "You're observant," he said softly. "Always scribbling notes, watching. You think I don't notice, but I do. That makes you different from the others." Emily swallowed hard. "I just like to write." "Of course you do." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Writers carry truth, but truth can be dangerous. Sometimes it's better to let certain things stay in shadows." The air thickened. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears. "Has anyone ever told you," he continued, circling the desk, "that curiosity can be a trap? You start pulling at strings, and suddenly the whole fabric unravels." Emily clutched her notebook under the desk. Every instinct screamed not to let him see it. A noise outside the door broke the tension, a faint shuffle, like someone lingering in the hallway. Harlan's head snapped toward it, eyes narrowing. For a second, the warmth in his expression vanished, replaced by cold calculation. Then it returned, his smile sliding back into place. "Seems we're not alone," he said lightly. "This school never rests." Emily glanced at the clock. Nearly 7 p.m. Too late for anyone else to still be here, except Ms. Lowell. She thought of the substitute's watchful eyes, the way she seemed to recognize the same unease Emily felt. Hope flickered, but she dared not show it. Harlan leaned against her desk now, closer than before. "You know, Emily, I've seen students like you. Bright, quiet, always thinking they see more than others. But sometimes that imagination can play tricks." His hand rested on the edge of her desk. "You wouldn't want to misunderstand me, would you?" Her voice trembled. "No, sir." "Good girl." He straightened, brushing invisible dust from his sleeve. "We'll keep this between us. No need to trouble your parents, or anyone else." The lamp's dim glow flickered, casting strange shadows across the walls. Emily's pen scratched quietly against paper beneath her desk. A single line. "He knows I see him." At last, Harlan dismissed her. "Run along then, and remember, detention isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's privilege." She left the classroom with her chest tight, the hallway suffocatingly silent. Behind her, she heard the lock click. In the distance, another sound followed, the faint squeak of shoes retreating into the shadows. She wasn't the only one who had been there. As Emily clutched her notebook, one thought burned hotter than fear. If someone else had been watching, maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. But the next morning, the school would wake to news that shattered even whispers into screams. Chapter 6. Marks on the blackboard by morning. Emily had convinced herself. She had imagined half of what happened in detention. Maybe Harlan's words were just strange. Maybe the tension in the room was her nerves. She tried to bury the fear beneath routine, blending into the tide of students filling the hallway. But the illusion shattered before first period. A scream cut through the chatter, high-pitched, jagged, real. Doors swung open. Students spilled into the corridor. At the far end, near room 3B, 2 freshmen stood frozen, their faces pale as chalk. Teachers rushed forward. The door had been locked, but the janitor forced it open. Inside, the air was heavy, tense, suffocating. On the blackboard, streaks of dark marks smeared across equations written the night before. Below it, slumped against the wall, was a student. Maya. Her eyes stared blankly, her uniform torn, her face drained of color. The silence in the room was so thick it seemed to choke everyone present. Gasps, sobs, frantic whispers spread like wildfire. No, it can't be. Somebody call for help. Was she here all night? Emily stood among the crowd, her notebook pressed hard against her chest. The memory of detention clawed at her. Harlan's smile, his cryptic words, the lock clicking behind her. Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream what she knew, but fear welded her jaw shut. Then Harlan arrived. His reaction was flawless, his face twisted in shock, hand gripping the doorframe as if holding himself up. "Maya," he whispered, voice cracking perfectly. He stumbled forward, dropping to his knees beside her, trembling as though the sight had broken him. Teachers pulled him back, murmuring comfort. Students clung to each other, tears flowing freely. The perfect teacher had become the grieving mentor, his pain so convincing that no one thought to question it. "She was one of my best," he said hoarsely, wiping at his eyes. "I just saw her yesterday. She was struggling, but I thought—" He cut himself off, shaking his head, shoulders hunched in despair. The principal arrived, ordering students back to class, but no one listened. Rumors spun faster than truth could catch them. They said the door was locked. Then how did she? Someone must have left her there. "Do you think she collapsed?" Harlan seized the narrative. "Maya was under pressure," he told a cluster of teachers, his tone low but audible enough to spread. "Grades, family. She confided in me. I should have done more." His voice cracked again, his sorrow rehearsed yet believable. Within minutes, the story had shifted. Tragedy, not crime. A struggling girl, not a victim. Emily couldn't breathe. She knew what she saw last night. The fear in Maya's eyes, the sound of the lock, the way Harlan leaned too close. But everyone else saw only his performance. Ms. Lowell stood at the back of the crowd, her expression unreadable. Unlike the others, she didn't rush to comfort Harlan or to repeat his version of events. Her gaze flicked to the blackboard, to the smeared marks, then to Emily, whose hands shook as she clutched her notebook. For a moment, their eyes locked. It was enough. Emily understood. Ms. Lowell didn't believe him either. Still, speaking the truth was dangerous. The school wanted order, not scandal. The administration whispered about privacy and respect, urging silence. The students, desperate for answers, filled the gaps with stories, each more twisted than the last. Fear turned to hysteria. Some swore they saw Maya's shadow near the stairwell. Others claimed she left a note hidden in the library. Through it all, Harlan remained the image of sorrow. He comforted students, hugged parents, even led a moment of silence in the courtyard. His voice trembled just enough. His tears glistened, on cue. He was untouchable, again, but marks leave stains no performance can erase. That night, Emily opened her notebook and wrote in shaky letters, "He's not grieving. He's hiding." And in another corner of the school, Ms. Lowell unfolded a folder she had carried for years, filled with clippings and case files from a past too similar to ignore. The pattern was beginning again, and this time, she promised herself, she would not stay silent. Emily had never been one to speak much. She preferred corners over crowds, notebooks over conversations. Most people barely noticed her presence in class, but that suited her just fine. While others basked in Mr. Harlan's attention, she observed, quietly, pen moving steadily across her pages. It began with little things, notes she scribbled that no one else thought twice about. Which students he praised most, which ones he kept after class, the way he sometimes closed the blinds during tutoring sessions, shutting out the rest of the world. She didn't yet know what she was collecting, only that it felt important. Bye, see you. Late autumn, the whispers had started. Did you hear about Jenna? A girl muttered near the lockers. She stayed late with Harlan. Hasn't been the same since. She looks exhausted, another added. Like she doesn't sleep anymore. Emily listened without speaking, her ears tuned to the edges of conversations others ignored. The stories were vague, fragmented. Students who left detention pale and trembling, rumors of extra help sessions that never seemed to involve much studying, names that quietly disappeared from after-school clubs. Nothing concrete, nothing anyone dared to accuse out loud. Fear has a way of living in half-spoken words. One boy, Alex, whispered to his friend in the cafeteria, "I'm never staying after with him again. Not worth it." When pressed, he only shook his head, refusing to explain. Emily wrote it all down. Every rumor, every shift in mood, every glance that carried unspoken meaning. She noticed how students avoided eye contact after certain days, how some grew quieter, more withdrawn, while others clung to Harlan with strange, almost desperate loyalty. What unsettled her most wasn't just the rumors themselves, it was how quickly they faded. A student would show up shaken one day, then act normal the next, their fear swallowed whole, as though some invisible hand pressed down on them, forcing silence. At first, Emily thought she was imagining it. But her notes filled faster than she expected, pages lined with careful observations. Jenna stayed behind again, came out with red eyes. Mr. Harlan gave Liam special permission to skip an assignment. No one else allowed. Rachel cried in the bathroom, wouldn't say why. Patterns began to emerge, subtle but undeniable. He chose students who were vulnerable, those struggling with grades, those whose parents trusted him most, those who wouldn't risk their reputation by speaking up. And yet, to the outside world, he remained untouchable. Teachers joked about his fan club. Parents praised his dedication. Even the principal smiled when mentioning his name, proud to call him St. Alden's shining star. Emily started to wonder if she was the only one who truly saw the cracks beneath his polished mask. The tension grew heavier after one particular evening. 2 students had been assigned detention, but only one returned home on time. The other, Maya, claimed she had to stay later, though she avoided saying why. Her eyes darted nervously whenever the subject came up. Emily wrote a single chilling line that night. Something happens in detention, something no one talks about. The whispers became harder to ignore. Some said he favored students who gave him gifts. Others muttered about doors locked from the inside. But still, the laughter in the hallways drowned out the fear. Harlan's charm was too strong, his grip too tight. Emily, however, could no longer shake the feeling that the school itself was keeping secrets. As she tucked her notebook into her backpack one afternoon, she overheard 2 seniors arguing. "I'm telling you," one hissed, "she didn't just transfer. People don't vanish like that." Emily froze. Vanish. The word clung to her, sharper than all the others. That night, she opened her notebook and wrote in bold letters across the page, "If no one else will keep track, I will." It was the first time her notes stopped being observations and became evidence. And soon someone else would notice her writing. Emily's notebook had become heavier with every page she filled, but she never imagined anyone else would care about her quiet investigation. That changed the day Ms. Lowell walked into St. Alden High. The substitute teacher arrived on a Wednesday morning, her entrance so understated most students barely noticed. She carried a leather bag that looked too worn for someone new, her shoulders hunched as though she wanted to disappear into the walls. Her voice, soft and hesitant, trembled slightly when she introduced herself to the class. "I'll be covering English for a few weeks," she explained, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Please, Be patient with me. Some students smirked, already sensing weakness. Teachers who lacked authority rarely lasted long at St. Aldan. But Emily watched more closely. Ms. Lowell's eyes scanned the room not with nervousness alone, but with intensity, lingering on the smallest details others ignored. The faint tear in a student's sleeve, the exhaustion on Jenna's face, the way Mr. Harlan passed by the door and students instinctively straightened. She noticed. During her first week, Ms. Lowell remained quiet in the staff lounge. Most substitutes either gossiped eagerly or tried too hard to fit in, but she kept to herself, sipping coffee slowly, eyes lowered. Only when Harlan entered did her posture change. Her hand stiffened around the cup, her gaze sharpened, and she seemed to measure his every movement. Emily wasn't the only one watching anymore. It took time, but whispers reached Ms. Lowell as well. A girl in her class accidentally mentioned, "At least you don't keep us after dark like he does." When Lowell asked what she meant, the student quickly laughed it off, cheeks pale, muttering something about extra help. But the substitute's expression turned grim, as though the comment had struck a nerve she kept hidden. That night she stayed late, grading papers in an empty classroom. Through the quiet she heard it, the distant sound of a door locking followed by a muffled voice. She froze, every muscle tightening. The school was different at night, too quiet, too vulnerable, and it dragged her back to a place she'd tried to bury. Years ago she had worked at another school. Different name, different town. There too a teacher had been beloved. Parents praised him, students adored him, the staff admired his dedication. Until the night police found what no one wanted to believe. A classroom turned into a crime scene. Victims silenced, evidence hidden in plain sight. Ms. Lowell had testified, but justice came late. Too late for some. The school board buried the scandal, and she carried the guilt with her, haunted by what she had seen and failed to stop. And now, here at St. Aldan, the signs were too familiar. She started keeping her own notes, not unlike Emily's, though she didn't yet know about the girl's secret journal. She documented the names of students Harlan favored, the times he volunteered for detention duty, the strange tension in the halls whenever his footsteps echoed nearby. Each observation deepened the pit in her stomach. But suspicion was not proof. She remembered all too well how people had dismissed her before, how her warnings had been labeled paranoia, how charm always outweighed caution. Confronting him without evidence would only backfire. Still, her eyes betrayed her unease every time Harlan walked past. And one afternoon, while Emily slipped her notebook into her backpack, she caught Ms. Lowell watching her. Their gazes met, briefly, but enough. The substitute's look was not judgment but recognition, a flicker of understanding that said, "I see what you see." For the first time, Emily wondered if she wasn't alone, but allies in shadows often attract danger. As the final bell rang, Harlan's voice echoed cheerfully down the hallway calling for students who owed him detention. His tone was light, almost playful, but Ms. Lowell stiffened as though she had heard a threat hidden beneath. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "Not again. Not this time." And with that, she closed. Her gradebook, gathered her papers, and resolved to stay behind after school. Someone had to watch him. The hallways of St. Aldan High were never meant to be this quiet. At midnight, the school felt like a body without a pulse, long corridors stretching endlessly, lockers sealed tight like rows of coffins, and the faint flicker of fluorescent lights fighting against the darkness. The sound came suddenly. Ding. A single bell, sharp and hollow, rang through the emptiness. No students, no staff, no reason for it to ring. Yet the echo clung to the walls like a scream trapped inside stone. A draft carried loose papers down the hallway, fluttering past the door of room 3B. The classroom was locked, but the air around it felt different, heavier, colder, as if the building itself knew something lay hidden inside. The blinds were drawn, but a faint sliver of light bled through the gap. Inside the room, the smell was unmistakable. Not the stale scent of chalk or dust, but something metallic, faintly sour. On the blackboard, streaks of red chalk formed words half erased, but beneath them, a darker stain lingered where no chalk should be. And then, footsteps. The echo of leather shoes against the polished floor broke the silence. Calm, slow, confident. From the shadows at the far end of the hallway, a tall figure emerged. Mr. Harlan. By daylight, he was a man people admired. Parents spoke of his patience. Students whispered about his charm, his way of making even history sound alive. He was the kind of teacher people trusted with their children, the one who stayed late to help struggling students, who volunteered for after-school programs, who never seemed to lose his temper. But here, under the pale glow of midnight lights, he was someone else entirely. His eyes carried no warmth, his mouth no smile. He walked straight toward room 3B with a set of keys in his hand. The bell rang again, ding this time, closer, louder, as if the sound were following him. Mr. Harlan paused outside the classroom, listening. A smile flickered, sharp, fleeting, wrong. He slid the key into the lock and twisted. The door groaned open. The room greeted him with silence. Desks perfectly aligned, textbooks stacked neatly on the counter, a globe resting in the corner. To anyone else, it looked ordinary. But Mr. Harlan didn't see the desks. He saw the stains hidden beneath them, the scratches on the linoleum where chairs had been dragged violently out of place. He saw memories that no one else would ever know. He stepped inside and closed the door with deliberate care. The lock clicked. From the hallway, the sliver of light under the door vanished. No one would see him here. Not tonight. Not ever. If he had his way. Mr. Harlan walked to the blackboard, his fingers brushing against the faint red streaks. He pressed, his thumb into the stain and then raised it to his lips, tasting it almost absent-mindedly, like a chef sampling his own creation. His eyes fluttered shut, and for a moment his mask slipped. Outside, the bell rang once more. Ding. The sound startled him this time. His head snapped toward the hallway, his expression hardening. He knew the schedule of this building better than anyone. That bell shouldn't ring at night. For the first time, a hint of unease crossed his face. He stood there in the dark classroom, staring at the door, every muscle taut. Then he chuckled softly, shaking his head as if dismissing a phantom. Still, he whispered under his breath, voice low and chilling. Curiosity always finds its way back, doesn't it? The words hung in the air, unanswered. The silence of the school swallowed them whole. In the morning, St. Alden High would look normal again. Students would laugh in these same halls, lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking against the tiles. And Mr. Harlan would be there, smiling, greeting, teaching, his mask firmly in place. But tonight, the classroom had already become something else. A stage, a cage, a secret. And the bell had marked the beginning. Morning sunlight spilled across the same hallways that had felt haunted hours before. Gone was the silence of midnight. In its place came chatter, laughter, the slam of lockers, the squeak of sneakers on polished tiles. St. Alden High had come alive again, and with it came the man everyone trusted. Mr. Harlan walked through the doors like a celebrity entering a stage. His tie was perfectly knotted, his smile disarming, his voice warm as he greeted each student by name. To the casual eye, he was the embodiment of what a teacher should be, charismatic, approachable, endlessly patient. Morning, Daniel. Great essay yesterday. Sarah, you've really improved your reading. Liam, big game tonight, right? I'll be cheering for you. Students lit up at his attention. Parents often said they wished every teacher cared like he did. The principal praised his gift for connection. The PTA adored him, and other staff envied his ability to win over even the most difficult teenagers. But behind that glow of admiration, subtle cracks were already forming. Mr. Harlan lingered too long when speaking to certain students, his hand occasionally brushing a shoulder when no one else was looking. He offered private tutoring that stretched late into the evening. He asked questions not every teacher would dare to, about family troubles, about secrets best left at home. Most wrote it off as dedication. Only the sharpest eyes noticed how carefully he blurred the lines between teacher and confidant. During a parent-teacher meeting, Mrs. Kim once remarked how her daughter seemed unusually attached to Mr. Harlan. He smiled, laughed softly, and replied, "That's just what happens when you make learning exciting." Everyone chuckled along. The suspicion faded instantly beneath his charm. In class, his lessons seemed alive. He didn't just teach history, he performed it. He could make the signing of a treaty sound like a suspense thriller, the fall of an empire like a personal tragedy. Students leaned forward in their seats, captivated. He wielded charisma like a weapon, though no one recognized it as such. There was power in the way he held their attention, power in the way he could shape their moods, their loyalty, their trust. And power, once gained, demands to be used. Still, most never questioned him. Why would they? A man so adored, so indispensable, so perfect, couldn't possibly be hiding anything sinister. That's what they told themselves, and what he encouraged them to believe with every easy smile. Yet every mask eventually slips, sometimes only for a second, sometimes only to those who dare to look closer. One student did. Emily sat quietly at the back of his classroom, notebook always in, hand eyes sharper than her age suggested. She wasn't his favorite, nor was she invisible. But she watched. She saw the way he leaned too close when whispering to another girl, the way his smile hardened when he thought no one was looking. And while the rest of the school celebrated their perfect teacher, Emily had already begun writing notes that no one else wanted to read. In time, those notes would become the whispers that carried through the hallways.